She was just a waitress, but the billionaire asked her to marry him after their first kiss. The mirror reflected a stranger. Zariah Simone Coleman stood in her tiny Brooklyn apartment bathroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The gold dress she'd borrowed from Melanie hugged her curves perfectly, its shimmer making her warm brown skin glow under the harsh fluorescent light. Her box braids were swept up into an elegant updo, with a few strands deliberately left loose to frame her face. "Girl, you look like $1,000,000! Melanie Carter's voice carried from the bedroom, followed by the clicking of her heels on the worn hardwood floor. "And I'm not just saying that because it's my dress." Zariah's fingers traced the delicate gold chain around her neck, her mother's necklace, the only piece of jewelry she owned worth wearing to such an event. "I don't know, Mel. I feel like I'm playing dress-up." "That's exactly what everyone does at these fancy galas." Melanie appeared in the doorway, resplendent in emerald green. "Besides, you earned that invitation fair and square. Top of your nursing class, remember?" Zariah sighed, adjusting the dress one last time. The invitation to the Healthcare Excellence Gala had come as a surprise, a recognition for outstanding nursing students. What the invitation didn't know was that she'd be serving breakfast at Joe's Diner at 6 a.m. tomorrow, trying to make ends meet. "I should be studying for next week's exam," Zariah protested weakly, even as Melanie handed her a clutch purse, "or at least getting some sleep before my shift." "You should be living your life for once," Melanie countered, spraying a cloud of Zariah's favorite daisy perfume around them both. "Your grandmother didn't raise you to hide your light under a bushel." The mention of Gran made Zariah's heart squeeze. She could almost hear the old woman's voice. "Baby girl, sometimes God dresses opportunity in uncomfortable clothes." Outside, the Uber driver honked twice. Melanie grabbed Zariah's hand, her dark eyes sparkling with excitement. "That's our chariot, Cinderella. Let's go before you talk yourself out of it." The ride to Manhattan felt like crossing into another world. As the city lights blurred past the window, Zariah's stomach twisted with equal parts excitement and dread. The Plaza Hotel loomed ahead, its golden lights piercing the early evening sky like a crown. "Remember," Melanie whispered as they joined the stream of designer-clad guests entering the hotel, "you belong here just as much as anyone else." The ballroom took Zariah's breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow shadows across marble floors, while well-dressed waiters, not unlike herself on other nights, weaved through the crowd with champagne flutes. She accepted a glass, if only to have something to do with her hands. "Miss Coleman?" A silver-haired woman in a tailored suit approached. "I'm Dr. Harrison from the selection committee. We were all impressed by your essay on community healthcare accessibility." Zariah straightened her shoulders, falling into the conversation with unexpected ease. This, at least, was familiar territory. Her passion for nursing, her dreams of making healthcare more accessible to communities like her own in Brooklyn. She barely noticed as Melanie slipped away, leaving her to shine. That's when she felt it, a gaze so intense it seemed to physically touch her skin. Zariah turned, her words trailing off mid-sentence, and met a pair of steel-blue eyes across the room. The man watching her stood apart from the crowd, though he was surrounded by people. Tall and broad-shouldered in a perfectly tailored black suit, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who never had to question whether they belonged. His dark hair was styled in that carefully messy way that suggested both wealth and rebellion, and a slight shadow of stubble outlined his sharp jaw. But it was his expression that caught and held her, the way he looked at her, as if she was the only real person in a room full of mannequins. "Ah, Doctor." Harrison followed her gaze. "I see you've caught the attention of Knox Owen. He's one of our biggest donors." The name should have warned her, should have sent her running in the opposite direction. Instead, Zariah found herself locked in place as Knox Owen excused himself from his group and began making his way toward her. Time seemed to slow. Each click of his expensive shoes on marble echoed in her ears. The champagne bubbles tickled her nose. Her heart picked up speed, a drumbeat warning of approaching danger or destiny. Knox Owen stopped before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. This close, she could smell his cologne, Bleu de Chanel, sophisticated and masculine, and see the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled. "I apologize for interrupting." His voice was deep, with the kind of rough edge that suggested he was more comfortable in boardrooms than ballrooms, "but I couldn't help overhearing your thoughts on community healthcare. I'd love to hear more." Dr. Harrison smiled knowingly and excused herself, leaving Zariah alone with a man who probably spent more on his watch than she made in a year. She should have felt intimidated. Instead, she felt a spark of challenge. "That's a dangerous offer, Mr. Owen," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. "I could talk about healthcare inequality all night." His smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "Knox," he corrected, "and I'm counting on it." Later, Zariah would remember this moment, the exact second before everything changed. She would remember the weight of her mother's necklace, the soft brush of borrowed silk against her skin, the way the champagne bubbles matched the effervescent feeling in her chest. She would remember thinking, "Just this once, just for tonight, let me pretend I belong in his world." But destiny has a way of taking our careful plans and tossing them into the wind. And as Knox Owen's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her forget to breathe, Zariah had no idea that this night would be the beginning of a love story that would change everything she thought she knew about belonging, truth, and the price of dreams. She took a sip of champagne to hide her smile, unaware that in less than an hour, this mysterious billionaire would ask her a question that would turn her whole world upside down. The Plaza Hotel's terrace offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars against the velvet night sky. Zariah wrapped her hands around the stone balustrade, letting the cool autumn air clear her head. She'd escaped outside, needing a moment to process the whirlwind that was Knox Owen. For the past hour, they'd talked about everything and nothing. Healthcare reform had led to discussions of their favorite books, which somehow evolved into debating whether New York pizza was truly superior to Chicago deep dish. Knox had strong opinions about everything, but there was something playful in the way he argued, as if he enjoyed watching her challenge his views. "Running away," his voice came from behind her, deep and amused. Zariah turned, finding Knox standing in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the warm light from the ballroom. He'd loosened his bow tie, and something about that small display of imperfection made her heart skip. "Just needed some air," she replied, watching as he crossed the terrace to join her. "These kinds of events aren't really my scene, mine either." He leaned against the balustrade beside her, their shoulders almost touching. So though tonight's proven to be an exception, the way he looked at her made her skin tingle. No one had ever looked at her quite like that before, as if they were trying to memorize every detail of her face. "So," Knox continued, "tell me something real, Zariah Coleman. Something you wouldn't tell anyone else at this party." She laughed, but it came out shakier than she intended. "That's a dangerous request from someone I just met. I'm a dangerous man." His smile held a hint of self-deprecation. "At least, that's what the tabloids say." "And what do you say?" Knox turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I say I've never met anyone like you. Someone who sees past all the noise and actually listens. Someone who argues with me about healthcare policy one minute and quotes Lauryn Hill the next." Zariah's cheeks warmed. She had quoted "Everything is Everything" during their discussion about fate and choices. "You recognized Lauryn Hill?" "I contain multitudes," he smirked, "though I'm more of a Rolling Stones man myself." A gust of wind swept across the terrace, and Zariah shivered. Without hesitation, Knox shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body, and his scent enveloped her like an embrace. "Thank you," she murmured, fighting the urge to bury her face in the collar. "It looks better on you anyway." His voice had dropped lower, more intimate. "Everything does." The compliment hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken possibility. Zariah's heart thundered in her chest as Knox stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance they'd maintained all evening. "Dance with me." He held out his hand, and through the open doors the strains of a slow jazz number drifted out onto the terrace. "Here?" She glanced around the empty terrace. "There's no one else out here." "Exactly." Something about the moment felt surreal. The city spread out below them, the music floating on the night air, this impossibly handsome man looking at her as if she were something precious. Zariah placed her hand in his, and Knox pulled her close. They swayed together under the stars, his hand warm against the small of her back. Zariah could feel the solid strength of his chest, the steady beat of his heart. This close, she could see the faint scar above his right eyebrow, the slight stubble darkening his jaw, the way his eyes seemed to hold secrets she longed to uncover. "What are you thinking?" Knox murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "That this feels like a dream," she admitted. "And I'm afraid of waking up." He pulled back slightly to look at her, his expression intense. What if I told you I could make it real? Before she could ask what he meant, Knox stopped dancing. His hands slid down her arms to grasp her fingers, and to Zariah's complete shock, he lowered himself to one knee. "Knox!" Her voice came out as a whisper. "What are you doing? Something crazy?" He looked up at her, his eyes blazing with determination. "Something I've never done before. Zariah Coleman, marry me." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What? We just met. And in these few hours, I've felt more alive than I have in years." His grip on her hands tightened. "I know it sounds insane, but I've spent my whole life making calculated decisions, playing it safe. For once, I want to follow my heart." Zariah's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Men like Knox Owen didn't propose to women they'd just met, especially not women who served coffee for minimum wage. The crushing weight of her lie, her omission about her real job, pressed against her chest. "You don't know me," she protested weakly. "I know enough." Knox rose to his feet but kept hold of her hands. "I know you're brilliant and passionate. I know you fight for what you believe in. I know you make me laugh, make me think, make me want to be better. Everything else, we can learn together." A tear slipped down Zariah's cheek. "This is crazy." "Maybe." He reached up to brush away her tear with his thumb. "But sometimes crazy is exactly what we need. I'm not asking for an answer right now. Take time to think about it. Just consider the possibility." Before she could respond, Knox cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. His lips were soft but insistent, and Zariah found herself melting into him despite her better judgment. The kiss tasted of champagne and possibility, of dreams too wild to voice aloud. When they finally broke apart, Zariah's whole body was trembling. Knox rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I have a car waiting," he said softly. "Let me drive you home. We can talk more." Reality crashed back like a bucket of cold water. Home meant Brooklyn. Home meant her tiny apartment above the laundromat. Home meant the truth she wasn't ready to face. "I can't." She stepped back, though it felt like tearing herself in half. "I promised my friend Melanie I'd leave with her." Something flickered in Knox's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or suspicion. But he recovered quickly, pulling a business card from his pocket. "Then take this. My personal number is on the back." Zariah accepted the card, its weight in her hand feeling far heavier than mere paper should. "Think about it," Knox said again. "About us, about the possibilities." Inside, Melanie was probably looking for her. Inside was reality, with all its complications and consequences. But out here, with the city lights below and Knox's jacket still warming her shoulders, Zariah allowed herself one more moment of fantasy. "I will," she promised, and she meant it. Knox lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a seal on a contract. "Good night, Zariah Coleman. Dream of me." She fled back to the ballroom, her heart racing and her mind in chaos. The business card burned in her clutch like a secret, and Knox's kiss still tingled on her lips. As she found Melanie and made their excuses to leave, one thought kept circling in her mind. What have I done? And more importantly, what am I going to do now? In the taxi home, Melanie chattered excitedly about the evening, but Zariah barely heard her. She was too busy thinking about steel blue eyes and impossible propositions, about truth and lies, and the thin line between dreams and reality. Tomorrow she would wake up and serve coffee at Joe's diner. But tonight she had danced in the arms of a billionaire who wanted to marry her. The question was, would she be brave enough to say yes? And if she did, how long could she keep her real life hidden from a man who seemed to see right through every wall she'd ever built? The morning after the gala arrived with brutal clarity. At 5:45 a.m., Zariah stood in Joe's diner's cramped employee bathroom, transforming from the woman who'd been kissed under the stars into the waitress who served bottomless coffee with a smile. Her fingers trembled as she tied her apron, Knox's business card burning a hole in her pocket where she'd transferred it from her clutch. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Miguel, the cook, commented as she emerged from the bathroom. He'd worked the morning shift with her for 2 years now, and his weathered face creased with concern. "Everything okay, Z?" "Just tired," she managed to smile, checking that her name tag was straight. "Big night." "Must have been," he chuckled, firing up the grill. "You're wearing yesterday's makeup." The first customers began trickling in as dawn painted Brooklyn in shades of grey and gold. Zariah moved on autopilot, pouring coffee, taking orders, her mind replaying every moment with Knox. The weight of his jacket on her shoulders, the warmth of his hands, the impossible question he'd asked. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket during a rare, quiet moment. An unknown number, but she knew who it was before she opened the message. "Good morning, Zariah. I hope you dreamed of me, because I certainly dreamed of you. Dinner tonight." Her heart leapt and plummeted simultaneously. Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Zariah looked up and nearly dropped her phone. Melanie strode in, still wearing her party dress under a leather jacket, her hair slightly disheveled. "Girl, we need to talk. I'm working," Zariah hissed, glancing nervously at the other customers. "I know, and that's exactly why I'm here." Melanie slid onto a stool at the counter, lowering her voice. "Knox, Owen's personal assistant, has been calling every hospital and medical office in the city, trying to find you. What exactly happened on that terrace?" Zariah's stomach churned. "How do you know that?" "Because I work at Manhattan General's admin office, remember? They called us too." Melanie's eyes narrowed. "What aren't you telling me?" "Order up," Miguel called from the kitchen, saving Zariah from responding immediately. She busied herself delivering plates, refilling coffee cups, buying time to think. When she finally returned to Melanie, her friend was scrolling through her phone. "Oh my God," Melanie whispered. "He's trending. Some mysterious woman captures heart of NYC's most eligible bachelor. There are blurry photos of you two on the terrace." "What?" Zariah grabbed the phone, her heart racing as she saw the grainy images. They were dark and distant, but there was no mistaking Knox's tall frame or her gold dress. "Zariah." Melanie's voice was gentle but firm. "What happened last night?" Taking a deep breath, Zariah told her everything. The conversation, the dance, the kiss, the proposal. With each word, the reality of her situation became more apparent. "He asked you to marry him." Melanie's voice rose, drawing curious looks from nearby customers. "After one night?" "Shh!" Zariah glanced anxiously around the diner. "Yes, and I haven't answered him yet. I can't answer him. This whole thing is insane. What's insane is that you're standing here serving eggs when a billionaire is trying to find you." Melanie paused, realization dawning. "Wait, he doesn't know you work here, does he?" Zariah's silence was answer enough. "Oh, honey." Melanie reached across the counter to squeeze her hand. "You have to tell him." "Tell him what? That I lied by omission? That while he's running a billion-dollar empire, I'm scraping by on tips?" Zariah's voice cracked. "He'll think I was playing him all along. Or maybe he'll understand that you were scared," Melanie countered. "But the longer you wait, the worse it'll be." Before Zariah could respond, her phone vibrated again. Another message from Knox. "I can't stop thinking about last night. About you. Please say you'll have dinner with me." Melanie read the message over her shoulder. "Girl, answer him." "I don't know what to say," Zariah admitted. "Say yes," Melanie insisted. "Say yes, and then tell him the truth. Give him a chance to prove he's worthy of you." Zariah's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "Dinner sounds nice, but there's something we should talk about." His response was immediate. "I'll pick you up at 7. Send me your address." Another wave of panic hit her. Her tiny apartment above the laundromat wasn't exactly the kind of place billionaires visited. "Meet him somewhere," Melanie suggested, reading her expression. "Neutral ground?" Zariah nodded, typing again. "Could we meet instead? There's a small Italian place in Brooklyn Heights. Bella Luna." 3 dots appeared as Knox typed, and Zariah held her breath. Finally, "I love Italian. See you at 7, beautiful." The rest of her shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and scrambled eggs. By the time she clocked out at 2 p.m., Zariah was exhausted, but too wired to sleep. She had 5 hours to figure out how to tell Knox the truth without losing him completely. At home, she stood before her closet, feeling the vast gulf between her world and his. The gold dress from the gala hung like a costume, a reminder of a night that felt more like fantasy than memory. Finally, she chose a simple navy blue dress, modest but elegant, bought on sale last season. It felt more like her, and maybe that was the point. As she got ready, her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Truth ain't always pretty, baby girl, but it's always right." At 6:30, Zariah stood before her mirror, checking her appearance one last time. She'd worn her hair down tonight, her natural curls framing her face. The dress fit perfectly, and her mother's necklace gleamed at her throat. She looked like herself, not the fantasy version from the gala, but the real Zariah Coleman. Her phone buzzed with a text from Knox. "Already at the restaurant. Couldn't wait to see you." Taking a deep breath, Zariah gathered her courage. Tonight would change everything, one way or another. Either Knox would accept her for who she really was, or the fairy tale would end before it truly began. As she left her apartment, the evening air was thick with possibility. Brooklyn stretched out before her, its familiar streets somehow different now, charged with the electricity of impending change. In her purse, Knox's business card sat next to her diner name tag, two pieces of her life that were about to collide. The walk to Bella Luna felt like walking to her own execution, but Zariah held her head high. She was her grandmother's granddaughter, after all. Whatever happened tonight, she would face it with dignity and grace. The restaurant's warm lights beckoned ahead, and through the window she could see Knox already seated, checking his watch. Even in more casual attire, a charcoal grey sweater that probably cost more than her rent, he looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. "Lord, give me strength," Zariah whispered, then pushed open the door to face her destiny. Knox stood the moment Zariah entered Bella Luna, and the look in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. He moved through the cozy restaurant with casual grace, meeting her halfway. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered," he murmured, leaning in to kiss her cheek, his cologne wrapped around her like a memory of last night's dance. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she managed, trying to ignore how her skin tingled where his lips had touched. Knox guided her to their table with a light hand at the small of her back. He'd secured a private corner booth, partially hidden by a rustic wooden partition covered in twining ivy, a bottle of wine already breathed on the table. "I hope you don't mind," he said as they settled into the booth. "I took the liberty of ordering the Brunello. The owner here is an old friend." Of course he knew the owner. Zariah's planned confession stuck in her throat as Knox poured the wine with practiced ease. The deep red liquid caught the light from the hanging Edison bulbs above, sparkling like rubies. "You said there was something we should talk about," Knox began, his steel blue eyes studying her face. "I have to admit, those words kept me up all night." Zariah took a sip of wine to steady herself. It was probably worth more than her weekly grocery budget. "Knox, about last night." "If this is about the proposal," he interrupted, "I meant what I said. I know it was impulsive, maybe even crazy, but I don't regret it. It's not just about the proposal." She traced the rim of her wineglass with one finger. "It's about who I am, who you think I am." Knox leaned forward, his expression intense. "I think you're extraordinary. I think you're brilliant, passionate, and unlike anyone I've ever met." "But you don't really know me," she insisted. "Then let me." He reached across the table to take her hand. His palm was warm against hers, calloused in places she wouldn't have expected from a billionaire. "That's what dating is for, right? Getting to know each other." The server approached before Zariah could respond, and Knox ordered for them both in fluent Italian. Another surprise, another layer to this complicated man who looked at her like she was something precious. "You speak Italian?" she asked when they were alone again. "My mother was Italian," he said, something flickering behind his eyes. "Before she left, she made sure I learned the language. It's one of the few things she gave me that I actually kept." The casual mention of his abandonment issues hit Zariah like a physical blow. Here he was opening up to her, while she sat on a secret that could destroy his trust completely. "Knox, she started again, but he squeezed her hand. "Wait," he said softly. "Chant before whatever you're going to say. I want you to know something. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want things from me. My name, my money, my influence. But last night, talking to you about healthcare reform and social justice, watching you light up about making a difference in your community, that was real. You're real. And that's terrifying and exhilarating all at once." Tears pricked at Zariah's eyes. "You don't understand. I'm not what you think. I'm not Mrs. Coleman," a voice interrupted from nearby. "Oh my God, it is you." Zariah's blood froze. Standing by their table was Ashley, one of her regular customers from the diner. The blonde woman beamed, apparently oblivious to the tension she'd walked into. "I hardly recognized you without the uniform. How are you? The kids miss your special smiley face pancakes." Knox's hand stiffened in Zariah's. "Uniform?" Ashley's smile faltered as she glanced between them. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your date. I just wanted to say hi to my favorite waitress from Joe's." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Zariah watched as understanding dawned in Knox's eyes, followed quickly by confusion and something that looked dangerously like hurt. "I should go," Ashley mumbled, finally reading the room. "Nice seeing you, Zariah." Silence fell between them as Ashley hurried away. Knox slowly withdrew his hand from Zariah's. and the loss of contact felt like a physical pain. "A waitress," he said quietly, "at Joe's diner." "I was going to tell you," Zariah's voice cracked. "Tonight, that's what I wanted to talk about." "When?" His voice had gone flat. "Before or after you accepted my proposal?" "I haven't accepted anything," she reminded him, anger flaring through her panic. "And I wouldn't have, not without telling you the truth first." "The truth?" Knox laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Which is what exactly?" "That you've been playing some kind of game." "No," Zariah leaned forward, desperate to make him understand. "I work at the diner to pay for nursing school. I serve coffee and make pancakes, and yes, I was ashamed to tell you because I knew you'd look at me exactly like you're looking at me now." "And how am I looking at you?" "Like I've disappointed you. Like I'm somehow less than what you thought I was because I work a service job." Knox ran a hand through his hair, messing up its perfect style. "That's not... I don't care that you're a waitress, Zariah. I care that you lied." "I never lied," she protested. "I just didn't tell you everything. A lie of omission is still a lie." His voice was quiet but sharp. "You let me make assumptions. You let me..." He trailed off, and Zariah could see him rebuilding the walls she'd somehow breached last night. The vulnerable man who'd talked about his mother was gone, replaced by the cool, controlled businessman she'd first glimpsed across the ballroom. "I should go," she whispered, gathering her purse. "Zariah." Knox's voice stopped her as she stood. "Did any of it mean anything? Or was I just another rich man you could wrap around your finger?" The accusation stung like a slap. Zariah straightened her spine, channeling every ounce of pride her grandmother had instilled in her. "You want the truth, Knox? Here it is. I'm a waitress. I'm also a nursing student with a 4.0 GPA. I work 60 hours a week between school and the diner. I live in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. And yes, I was terrified to tell you because men like you don't end up with women like me except in fairy tales. But everything I said, everything I felt, that was real. You want to think I played you? Fine, but we both know who's really running away right now." She turned and walked out of Bella Luna, her head high despite the tears threatening to fall. Behind her, she heard Knox call her name, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The cool night air hit her face as she emerged onto the street. Brooklyn stretched out before her, familiar and unchanging, while her world crumbled around her. She made it halfway down the block before the first tear fell. "Zariah!" Knox's voice rang out behind her. "Wait!" But she kept walking, her heels clicking against the sidewalk, each step taking her further from the fairy tale and back to reality, back to early mornings and coffee refills and dreams that seemed suddenly much further away than they had 24 hours ago. In her purse, her phone began to ring. She ignored it, just as she ignored the sound of footsteps behind her. The night swallowed her tears as she walked home alone, leaving behind a half-empty bottle of expensive wine and a man who'd offered her everything except the one thing she really needed, acceptance for exactly who she was. Knox Owen had never chased anyone in his life, yet here he was, standing in the middle of a Brooklyn street, watching Zariah's figure disappear into the night. His phone was in his hand, her number on the screen, but she wasn't answering. Each unanswered ring felt like an indictment. "Mr. Owen!" His driver stepped out of the waiting car. "Should we follow her?" "No." Knox's jaw clenched. "Take me back to Manhattan." The drive across the bridge gave him too much time to think, about the hurt in Zariah's eyes, about the pride in her voice when she'd thrown her truth in his face, about his own reaction, which felt increasingly like a mistake with each passing minute. His penthouse felt empty when he arrived, its luxurious spaces suddenly meaningless. Knox loosened his tie with angry fingers, making his way to the private gym that occupied one corner of the floor. Without bothering to change, he attacked the punching bag, each hit punctuated by a memory. Punch. Zariah's smile when she talked about her dreams. Punch. The way she'd felt in his arms during their dance. Punch. Men like you don't end up with women like me except in fairy tales. Damn it. He grabbed the bag, breathing hard. When had he become the kind of man his father would approve of, judging someone by their job rather than their character? Meanwhile, across the bridge in Brooklyn, Zariah sat on her fire escape, still in her navy blue dress. The night air was cool, but she barely noticed. Her phone had finally stopped ringing, and the silence felt both like relief and loss. "Baby girl!" Melanie's voice carried up from the street. "I brought reinforcements." Moments later, Melanie emerged through Zariah's window onto the fire escape, carrying a pint of ice cream and 2 spoons. She settled beside her friend, saying nothing as she handed over a spoon. "How did you know?" Zariah asked, accepting the comfort food. "Because I know you," Melanie replied simply. "And because Knox Owen's face is all over social media right now, looking like someone killed his puppy outside Bella Luna." Zariah's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" Melanie pulled out her phone, showing her friend the latest gossip site updates. There were indeed photos. Knox standing on the sidewalk looking lost, Knox getting into his car, his expression stormy. The headlines ranged from speculative to sensational. "A mystery woman breaks billionaire's heart." Zariah read aloud, her own heart twisting. "They have no idea what they're talking about." "So tell me," Melanie urged gently, "what really happened?" As Zariah recounted the evening's events, she found herself defending Knox even through her pain. "He wasn't entirely wrong," she admitted. "I did hide things from him. I was so scared of being judged that I became exactly what he accused me of being, someone with secrets." "Girl, stop." Melanie's voice was firm. "Being scared isn't the same as being manipulative. You were protecting yourself. Was I? Or was I just being a coward?" Before Melanie could respond, Zariah's phone lit up with a text from Knox. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" "Don't answer it," Melanie advised, but Zariah was already typing. "I think we've said enough for one night." His response came quickly. "No, we haven't. Not nearly enough. Please, Zariah, give me a chance to make this right." Across town, Knox paced his penthouse, staring at his phone. When no response came, he did something he'd never done before. He swallowed his pride and kept typing. "You were right. I'm the one who ran away. I let my past dictate my reaction instead of seeing you, really seeing you. The amazing woman who works harder than anyone I've ever met, who dreams bigger than anyone I know, who challenges me and calls me out on my bullshit. I don't care if you're a waitress or a CEO. I care that you're you." In Brooklyn, Zariah read his words through tears. Melanie squeezed her hand, offering silent support. "Pretty words," Zariah typed back, "but actions speak louder. Then let me show you. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I'll be at Joe's Diner." Zariah's heart stopped. "What? If that's your world, I want to know it. All of it. No more walls between us." Melanie read over Zariah's shoulder. "Well, damn. That's either really romantic or really stupid." "Maybe both," Zariah whispered. She stared at her phone, thoughts racing. Tomorrow was her morning shift. Knox Owen, showing up at Joe's Diner at the crack of dawn, would be like a peacock landing in a chicken coop. It could be a disaster, or it could be exactly what they needed. "Your move, Z," Melanie said softly. Zariah took a deep breath and typed, "The coffee's terrible, and the pancakes are mediocre at best." 3 dots appeared as Knox typed, then, "Good thing I'm not coming for the food." Despite everything, a smile tugged at Zariah's lips. "Can I wear something you don't mind getting syrup on? I'll buy a new wardrobe if it means you'll give me another chance. Just bring an open mind, and maybe some humility. I'm learning those are prerequisites for being in your life." Melanie watched the exchange with raised eyebrows. "You're really going to let him come to your job?" Zariah locked her phone, looking out over the Brooklyn skyline. "He wants to see my world. Let him see it. All of it. No more hiding. And if he can't handle it, then at least I'll know." Zariah's voice strengthened with resolve. "I spent one night pretending to fit into his world. Let's see if he can spend one morning in mine." Later that night, after Melanie had gone home and the ice cream was nothing but an empty container, Zariah stood in front of her mirror. She'd finally changed out of her date dress into comfortable pajamas, washed away her makeup, let down her hair. This was her, the real Zariah Coleman, without pretense or polish. Tomorrow, Knox Owen would see this version of her world, the early mornings, the regular customers, the rhythm of a life so different from his own. He'd see her in her waitress uniform, serving coffee and making change and living her real life. "Your move, rich boy," she whispered to her reflection. "Show me who you really are." Across the city, Knox stood at his penthouse window looking toward Brooklyn. He'd already called his assistant to clear tomorrow's morning meetings, already chosen clothes that wouldn't scream "billionaire trying too hard to be casual," already set his alarm for an hour he usually only saw from the other side after late nights of work. "Your move, pride," he murmured to his reflection in the glass. Time to get out of the way. The city stretched between them, a maze of lights and shadows, bridges and barriers. But tomorrow morning, for better or worse, their worlds would collide again. This time, There would be no borrowed dresses, no fancy wine, no pretense, just coffee, truth, and the chance to begin again. At 5:30 a.m., Joe's diner hummed with pre-opening routine. Zariah moved through her normal tasks, brewing coffee, filling sugar dispensers, wiping down counters, while trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. She'd barely slept, alternating between anticipation and anxiety about Knox's impending arrival. "You're jumpy this morning," Miguel observed from the kitchen, where he was prepping the grill. "Everything okay?" Before she could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Zariah's heart leaped into her throat as she turned, but it was just Mr. Rodriguez, their elderly regular who always arrived 15 minutes before opening. "Morning, sunshine," he called out, shuffling to his usual spot at the counter. "The usual, please." Zariah poured his coffee with practiced ease, grateful for the familiar routine. "Coming right up, Mr. R." At 5:55 a.m., she was arranging menus when movement outside caught her eye. A sleek black car had pulled up to the curb. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, she recognized Knox's tall figure emerging from the back seat. He'd actually done it. He was here. Knox paused outside the diner's window, and for a moment, their eyes met through the glass. He'd traded his usual suits for dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but somehow managed to look casual. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it nervously. The bell chimed again as he entered, bringing with him a gust of cool morning air and the subtle scent of his cologne. The diner suddenly felt smaller, as if his presence filled every corner. "You came," Zariah said softly, aware of Miguel and Mr. Rodriguez watching curiously. "I said I would." Knox's voice was equally quiet, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. The simple black uniform, the practical shoes, the name tag pinned to her apron. Instead of judgment, she saw something like wonder in his expression. "You look beautiful." A blush warmed her cheeks. "Liar. I look like what I am, a waitress starting her morning shift. And I meant what I said." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the shadows of fatigue under his eyes. Had he slept as poorly as she had? "You're beautiful in everything you do." Before she could respond, the bell chimed again as their first rush of regular customers began arriving. Construction workers, early shift nurses, taxi drivers ending their night shifts. The diner's energy shifted as booths filled, and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. "Take a seat wherever you'd like," Zariah said professionally, though her heart was racing. "I'll be with you in a minute." Knox chose a spot at the counter where he could watch her work. She felt his eyes on her as she moved between tables, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, exchanging friendly banter with regulars. To her surprise, he didn't look uncomfortable or out of place. Instead, he seemed fascinated by every interaction, every small detail of her routine. During a brief lull, she approached him with the coffee pot. "Ready to order? Whatever you recommend." His smile held a warmth that made her pulse skip. "I trust your judgment." Dangerous words. She poured his coffee, noting how his fingers brushed hers when she handed him the mug. "Miguel makes the best Denver omelet in Brooklyn." "Damn right I do," Miguel called from the kitchen, making them both laugh. The morning rush picked up speed. Zariah fell into her usual rhythm, but everything felt different with Knox there. He sipped his coffee and ate his omelet slowly, watching her handle the controlled chaos with grace and efficiency. When a young mother struggled with a fussy baby while trying to eat, Zariah saw Knox quietly ask the cashier to add the woman's bill to his tab. Around 8 a.m., she finally had another moment to breathe. She found Knox still at the counter, working on his laptop between glances at her. "Don't you have an empire to run?" she teased, refreshing his coffee. "The empire can wait." He closed his laptop, his expression serious. "This is more important. Watching me serve eggs and coffee, watching you in your element, seeing how everyone here lights up when you talk to them." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Understanding why you were afraid to show me this part of your life, and hating myself for proving your fears right." Zariah's hands trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. "Knox, you're amazing," he continued. "The way you remember everyone's orders, their stories, their lives, the way you make each person feel seen and valued. That's not just being a waitress, that's being extraordinary at whatever you do." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Now, you're definitely lying." "I never lie about important things." He reached across the counter to take her hand. "I was an idiot last night. I let my own insecurities cloud my judgment. The truth is, watching you here this morning, I'm more in awe of you than ever. A crash from the kitchen interrupted the moment. "Order up," Miguel called. "Go," Knox smiled, releasing her hand. "I'll be here." The morning continued its chaotic dance. Knox ordered more coffee, typed on his laptop, and observed everything with keen interest. Around 10 a.m., when the rush finally began to slow, Zariah noticed him in deep conversation with Mr. Rodriguez about the neighborhood's history. During her break, she joined Knox at the counter, sliding onto the stool next to him. "So still want to marry me now that you've seen the glamorous reality?" She meant it as a joke, but Knox's response was deadly serious, more than ever. "Knox, I'm not proposing again. Not yet." He turned to face her fully. "But I am asking for a chance to do this right. To know all of you, not just the parts you think I want to see. To show you all of me, not just the billionaire everyone expects." Zariah studied his face, the earnest blue eyes, the stubble darkening his jaw, the vulnerability she'd never expected to see in someone so powerful. "Okay," she said softly. Okay, let's try this. For real this time." She gestured around the diner. "This is my world. Knox, early mornings, hard work, big dreams, and yes, serving coffee. Can you handle that?" His answer was to lean in and kiss her right there at the counter of Joe's diner. The kiss tasted of coffee and promise, and somewhere in the background, she heard Miguel whistle approvingly. When they broke apart, Knox rested his forehead against hers. "I can handle anything as long as you're real with me. No more walls." "No more walls," she agreed. The bell chimed as new customers entered. Zariah straightened up, reaching for her order pad. "Stay?" she asked Knox. "My shift ends at 2. I cleared my whole day." He smiled that devastating smile that had first caught her attention at the gala. "I'm all yours." As Zariah moved to greet the new customers, she felt lighter than she had in days. Behind her, Knox opened his laptop again, settling in like he belonged there. And maybe, just maybe, he did. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, casting everything in a new light. In its glow, the distance between their worlds didn't seem so vast anymore. They were just two people, learning to bridge the gap with truth and trust and coffee that really was terrible, but somehow tasted better when shared. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of contrasts. Knox and Zariah navigated their growing relationship through early morning diner visits, late-night study sessions, and stolen moments between their vastly different schedules. But reality had a way of asserting itself, and tonight was their first real test. Zariah stood in her tiny bathroom, applying the finishing touches to her makeup while Melanie perched on the closed toilet lid, scrolling through her phone. "You're trending again," Melanie announced. "New York's most eligible bachelor off the market. There are pictures of Knox at Joe's from this morning. Let them talk." Zariah leaned closer to the mirror, carefully applying her lipstick. "We have bigger problems tonight. The infamous board dinner." Melanie whistled low. "Meeting Daddy Dearest." Tonight was Knox's quarterly board dinner, and he'd insisted on having Zariah by his side. It would be her first official appearance as his girlfriend, and more importantly, her first meeting with Augustus Owen, Knox's notoriously difficult father and the chairman of Owen Enterprises. "You're sure about this dress?" Zariah smoothed her hands over the elegant red silk. It was another loan from Melanie, who'd built quite a collection from her years working high-end retail before switching to hospital administration. "Trust me, it's perfect. Conservative enough for old money, but bold enough to show you're not intimidated." Melanie stood to adjust the dress's drape. "Besides, Knox won't be able to take his eyes off you." As if summoned by his name, Zariah's phone lit up with a text from Knox. "Car's on the way. You ready for this?" "No," she typed back honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." His response was immediate. "That's my girl. Remember, you've faced scarier things than a room full of billionaires." "Have I?" "You face Miguel before his morning coffee every day. The board doesn't stand a chance." Zariah laughed despite her nerves. In the weeks since their reconciliation at the diner, Knox had become a regular fixture in her world. He'd charmed her co-workers, befriended her regulars, and even learned to appreciate the diner's terrible coffee. More importantly, he'd shown up, not just physically but emotionally, proving every day that he meant what he'd said about accepting all of her. Now it was her turn to step into his world. The car that arrived was understated but luxurious, with Knox waiting inside. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that made her mouth go dry, but it was his expression when he saw her that made her heart skip. "You're breathtaking," he murmured, pulling her close for a kiss that threatened to ruin her lipstick. "Easy there, rich boy," she teased, though her voice was breathless. "We have a dinner to attend." The Manhattan restaurant was exactly as intimidating as she'd imagined. All soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and white-gloved waiters. Zariah felt a moment of kinship with the service staff, remembering her own days of navigating between tables with practiced grace. "Remember," Knox whispered as they approached the private dining room, "you belong here just as much as anyone else." "Do I?" She squeezed his hand. "Your father might disagree." "My father disagrees with everything on principle. It's his natural state of being." The dining room fell silent as they entered. 12 pairs of eyes turned to assess them, but Zariah focused on just one. Augustus Owen sat at the head of the table, his steel-gray hair and sharp features marking him clearly as Knox's father. Unlike his son's warm blue eyes, Augustus's were a cold gray that seemed to cut right through her. "Knox." Augustus's voice carried easily across the room. "You're late. Actually, we're right on time." Knox's hand was steady at the small of Zariah's back. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Zariah Coleman." "Zariah, you know Dr. Harrison from the healthcare gala." Dr. Harrison offered a warm smile, but the other board members' reactions ranged from polite curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. Augustus Owen's expression remained unreadable as Knox led Zariah to their seats. The first course arrived, something delicate involving caviar and gold leaf. Zariah was grateful for her years of observing fine dining etiquette from the other side of service as she navigated the array of silverware. "Miss Coleman," Augustus spoke suddenly, his voice carrying over the quiet murmur of conversation. "Knox tells me you're in healthcare." "Nursing school," she replied, matching his direct gaze. "I'll graduate next spring." "Admirable." His tone suggested it was anything but. "And in the meantime," Knox tensed beside her, but Zariah lifted her chin. "In the meantime, I work as a waitress to pay my tuition. I believe in earning my own way." A loaded silence fell over the table. Augustus's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed, how principled." "I think it's impressive," Dr. Harrison interjected. "We need more healthcare workers who understand the real challenges facing working-class communities." "Yes, well," Augustus took a measured sip of wine. "Understanding challenges is one thing. Being equipped to operate in certain circles is quite another." Knox's hand clenched around his fork. "Father, no, he's right." Zariah's voice was calm but clear. "I'm not equipped to operate in these circles. I didn't grow up learning about stock portfolios or yacht clubs, but I did learn about dignity, hard work, and treating people with respect regardless of their bank balance. Those seem like valuable skills in any circle." Another silence, heavier than the first. Then, to everyone's surprise, Augustus Owen laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, but genuine. "Well said, Ms. Coleman." He raised his wineglass slightly. "Perhaps my son's impulsiveness hasn't entirely clouded his judgment." The tension in the room eased slightly. As the next course arrived, conversation resumed its normal flow. Knox's thumb stroked the back of Zariah's hand under the table, a silent gesture of pride and support. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of expensive food and careful conversation. Zariah found unexpected allies in Dr. Harrison and a younger board member who, it turned out, had worked his way through college as a bartender. Even Augustus seemed to thaw slightly, though his questions remained pointed and his gaze calculating. It wasn't until they were back in the car, heading toward Brooklyn, that Zariah finally let out the breath she'd been holding all evening. "You were magnificent," Knox murmured, pulling her close. "You handled my father better than anyone I've ever seen." "I was terrified," she admitted, resting her head on his shoulder. "Couldn't tell. You looked like you owned the room." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm so proud of you. Even when I basically called out your father's classism at his own dinner, especially then." Knox's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Did you see his face? No one's spoken to him like that in years. He actually respected it." Zariah lifted her head to look at him. "Really? Trust me. If he hadn't, you'd know." That laugh. "That's the closest thing to approval he's shown since I refused to take over his position as CEO 5 years ago." The car crossed the bridge into Brooklyn, and Zariah felt herself relax as the familiar streets of her neighborhood came into view. Knox had offered to let her stay at his penthouse, but tonight she wanted her own space, her own bed, the comfort of her world after venturing so deep into his. "Stay?" she asked as they pulled up to her building. Knox's eyes darkened. "You sure?" "My shift doesn't start until noon tomorrow." She traced a finger along his jaw. And I think we both deserve a celebration after surviving tonight. His kiss was answer enough. As they made their way up to her apartment, Zariah realized something had shifted tonight. She'd faced one of her biggest fears, being judged by Knox's world, and survived. More than survived, she'd held her own. Later, as they lay tangled in her sheets, Knox trailing lazy kisses along her shoulder, she asked, "Do you ever wonder if this is crazy? Us trying to bridge these two worlds?" "Every day," he admitted, "and every day, I decide it's worth it." Zariah turned to face him, taking in the sight of this powerful man in her simple bed, looking at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "So your father's never going to fully approve. Good thing I stopped seeking his approval a long time ago." Knox pulled her closer. "The only person whose opinion matters to me is right here." Outside, Brooklyn carried on its nighttime rhythm, distant sirens, music from the bar down the street, the rattle of the subway. Inside, in this small space they'd carved out for themselves, none of that mattered. They were just Knox and Zariah, writing their own rules, creating their own world between worlds. "No regrets," she whispered against his lips. "Not a single one," he answered, and kissed her like he was sealing a promise. The headlines splashed across page 6 hit like a slap. "Gold digger or true love? The waitress who caught New York's most eligible bachelor." Below it was a series of photos. Knox leaving Joe's diner, Zariah in her uniform serving customers, their kiss at the board dinner, and most damaging, an old photo of Zariah from college, dancing at a club with an ex-boyfriend. "They're ruthless," Melanie said, watching as Zariah paced her apartment. "How did they even find that old photo?" "They found everything." Zariah's voice shook with anger and hurt. "My mother's death certificate, Gran's social security records, even my student loan debt. They're making it sound like I orchestrated this whole thing to trap Knox." Her phone buzzed again, another call from Knox that she let go to voicemail. He'd been trying to reach her all morning, ever since the story broke, but she needed time to process this invasion of her privacy. "You have to talk to him eventually," Melanie pointed out. "I know." Zariah sank onto her couch. I need a minute to be angry, to be hurt, to not have to be the bigger person who handles everything gracefully." A knock at her door made them both jump. "Zariah!" Knox's voice carried through the worn wood. "Please let me in." Melanie raised an eyebrow. "Want me to tell him to go away?" But Zariah was already moving to the door. When she opened it, Knox stood there looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his tie loose and his hair messed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "I've been going crazy trying to reach you," he said, stepping inside. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Melanie. "Oh, hi. I'll give you two some privacy." Melanie squeezed Zariah's arm as she passed. "Call me if you need anything." Once they were alone, Knox moved towards Zariah, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Did you know they were running this story?" "No," he answered immediately. "I found out when you did. I've already got my legal team working on a cease and desist." "Your legal team?" Zariah laughed bitterly. "Because that's how life works in your world, right? Someone wrongs you, and you just sick your lawyers on them." "Zariah, do you know what it felt like, opening my phone to see my mother's death certificate plastered across the internet, to have strangers analyzing my financial records like I'm some kind of criminal?" Her voice cracked. "To see comments calling me a gold digger, a social climber, a—" "Stop!" Knox crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms, despite her resistance. "Stop reading that garbage. None of it matters." "It matters to me." She pushed against his chest, but he held firm. "This is my life they're picking apart. My family. My reputation. I know." His voice was rough with emotion. "And I'm so sorry. I should have warned you this might happen. Should have protected you better." "I don't need your protection." But even as she said it, Zariah felt herself crumbling, tears finally breaking free. I just want to live my life, love who I love without it becoming some kind of scandal." Knox's arms tightened around her. "Love!" Zariah froze, realizing what she'd said. They hadn't used that word yet, dancing around it like so many other complicated things between them. She started, but Knox cut her off with a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I should have said it weeks ago. Should have shouted it from rooftops so everyone would know this isn't some tabloid story. It's real. You're real. We're real." Fresh tears spilled down Zariah's cheeks, but for a different reason now. "Knox, you don't have to say it back," he continued. wiping her tears with gentle thumbs. "Just let me love you. Let me fight for us. I do love you," she admitted, the words feeling like release and terror all at once. "That's what makes this so hard. Loving you means being part of your world, and your world is cruel." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Yeah, it can be, but you're stronger than all of them. You proved that with my father, and you'll prove it again." A notification sound from her phone made Zariah tense, but Knox reached over and turned it face down. "No more reading comments today," he said firmly. "No more letting strangers tell our story. We know what's real." "And what is real?" She looked up at him, needing the reassurance. "A waitress and a billionaire. How does that story ever end well?" "It ends well because we write the ending." Knox led her to the couch, pulling her down beside him. "You're not just a waitress, and I'm not just a billionaire. We're Knox and Zariah, and we're figuring this out together." She curled into his side, letting his steady heartbeat calm her. "Your father's probably having a field day with this." "Actually," Knox's voice held a note of surprise, "he called this morning to offer his support. Said any woman who could handle herself like you did at that dinner doesn't need defending, but he's happy to unleash the Owen legal team anyway." That startled a laugh out of Zariah. "Seriously, I think you impressed him more than we realized." Knox pressed a kiss to her temple. He recognizes strength when he sees it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the city noise drifting in through Zariah's open window. Finally, she asked, "What do we do now?" "Now?" Knox shifted to look at her. "Now we go get breakfast at Joe's, just like any other day. We show them that their stories can't touch us, that what we have is stronger than their headlines." "In your $5,000 suit? I keep spare clothes in the car now, remember?" His smile was tender. "I'm learning to navigate your world, just like you're learning to navigate mine." Zariah touched his face, studying the man who'd turned her life upside down and somehow made it better in the process. "I do love you, you know, even when it terrifies me." "Good." He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "Guy, because I plan on giving you reasons to love me for a very long time." Later, as they sat at the counter of Joe's diner, Knox in casual clothes, Zariah in her uniform, Miguel slapped down plates of his famous Denver omelets. "On the house," he announced. "Consider it solidarity against those vultures." Knox tried to protest, but Miguel waved him off. "Hey, you're family now, both of you. And family takes care of each other." Zariah felt tears threaten again, but this time they were happy tears, because this was real. The way Knox's hand found hers under the counter, the way her regular customers stopped by to offer support, the way two different worlds were slowly, imperfectly, beautifully merging into something new. Let them write their headlines. The real story was here, in a Brooklyn diner on a Monday morning, being written one moment at a time. The emergency room of Brooklyn General Hospital pulsed with controlled chaos. Zariah moved between beds during her clinical rotation, checking vitals and assisting the staff nurses. 2 months had passed since the tabloid scandal, and life had settled into a new rhythm until tonight. "Coleman," Dr. Richards called out, "we've got incoming. Multiple victims from a building fire in Manhattan." Zariah's heart stuttered. Knox was overseeing the renovation of an old apartment building in Lower Manhattan, planning to convert it into affordable housing. He'd been there all day, meeting with contractors. "Location?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Bowery District. First ambulance is 3 minutes out. The same neighborhood as Knox's project." Zariah's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, finding no messages from him. She fired off a quick text. "Please tell me you're okay." No response. The emergency bay doors burst open as the first ambulance arrived. Zariah forced herself to focus on the patients, pushing her personal fears aside. This was what she'd trained for. Hours blurred together. More victims arrived, some with severe smoke inhalation, others with burns. Zariah moved between them with growing confidence, earning approving nods from the senior staff. "You've got good instincts," Dr. Richards commented, as they stabilized a young construction worker. "Natural caregiver." Then a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Where is she? I need to find Zariah Coleman." Knox. He looked wild-eyed and disheveled, his usually immaculate suit covered in soot. A cut above his eye was still bleeding. "Sir, you need to be evaluated." A nurse tried to stop him. "Fire Knox," Zariah called out, her professional demeanor cracking at the sight of him. He spun toward her voice, relief flooding his face. "Zariah, thank God. You're hurt." She rushed to him, medical training taking over as she examined the cut. "Sit down before you fall down." I'm fine, but my team—" His voice broke. "3 of them are still being brought in. I should have checked the electrical system more thoroughly. Should have—" "Stop!" Zariah guided him to an exam bed. "This isn't your fault. Now let me do my job." She cleaned and bandaged his cut, checking for signs of smoke inhalation. Her hands remained steady, even as her heart raced. Knox caught one of her hands, pressing it to his chest. "I tried to text you," he said softly. "My phone got damaged in the chaos. All I could think about was getting to you." "Mr. Owen?" Augustus's voice cut through their moment. Knox's father stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically worried. "The press is gathering outside. We need to manage this." "Not now, father." Knox didn't release Zariah's hand. "Yes, now." Augustus stepped closer, lowering his voice. 3 people are critically injured. The media is already speculating about negligence. We need to get ahead of this. Zariah felt Knox tense. "Go," she whispered. "I've got patients to check on anyway." "I'll come back," he promised, kissing her quickly before following his father. The night stretched on. Zariah lost track of time as she helped treat the remaining victims. Most would recover fully, but 2 remained in critical condition. Every time she passed the waiting room, she saw Knox in intense discussion with his father and various men in suits. Around 3 a.m., Dr. Richards found her updating patient charts. "Go home, Coleman. Your shift ended an hour ago." "I can stay," she protested. "You've done enough. Get some rest." The doctor's eyes were kind. "You've shown remarkable composure tonight, especially given your personal connection to the situation." Zariah changed out of her scrubs in a daze. When she emerged into the waiting room, Knox was alone, his head in his hands. "Hey," she said softly. He looked up, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "Hey, I'm sorry I disappeared. You had to handle things." She sat beside him. "How bad is it?" "Bad." His voice was rough. "The media's painting it as corporate negligence. My father wants me to distance myself from the project, claim I wasn't directly involved in oversight. But you won't. No." Knox ran a hand through his hair. "These people trusted me. I promised them safe, affordable housing. I won't abandon them now." Zariah took his hand. "Then don't. The company's stock is already dropping. The board is panicking." He turned to look at her. "Father says I need to focus on damage control. That means no distractions." Her heart stopped. "Am I a distraction?" "Never." Knox's grip tightened. "But he thinks our relationship complicates things. Says the media will use you against me, paint me as unfocused, more interested in romance than responsibility. And what do you think?" "I think I love you." His voice strengthened. "I think you make me better, stronger, more focused on what really matters. Tonight, watching you work, seeing how you cared for my people without hesitation, I've never been more certain of anything." Relief warmed her chest, but uncertainty lingered. "Knox, if being with me makes this harder for you, don't." He turned to face her fully. "Don't even think about noble self-sacrifice. We're in this together. But your father, my father has spent his whole life choosing the company over everything else, over my mother, over me, over any chance at real happiness." Knox cupped her face in his hands. "I won't make the same mistake." New voices approached. More lawyers, more press handlers. Knox sighed, pressing his forehead to hers. "Go home," he whispered. "Get some sleep. I'll handle this, and then we need to talk." Something in his tone made her pulse jump. "About what?" "About us. About the future." He kissed her softly. "About how I never want to go through another night like this without you officially by my side." Before she could respond, Augustus's voice called out, "Knox, the press is waiting. Go." Zariah pushed him gently. "Do what you need to do. I'll be here." She watched him walk away, straight-backed despite his exhaustion. In that moment, seeing him choose integrity over easy answers, watching him balance duty with love, Zariah felt her heart expand with pride and certainty. Whatever came next, media storms, board pressure, family disapproval, they would face it together. Because somewhere between early morning coffee and emergency room chaos, between penthouses and diners, they'd built something real, something worth fighting for. Dawn was breaking as Zariah finally left the hospital. The sky was that peculiar shade of pearl gray that promised either storms or sunshine. Like their future, she thought, it could go either way. But for the first time since their relationship began, she wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. Because Knox had shown her, through actions rather than words, that some things were stronger than social expectations or family pressure. Some things, like love and integrity and trust, could weather any storm. Her phone buzzed with a text from Knox. "Meeting with the board in an hour. But after that, I'm all yours, forever, if you'll have me." Zariah smiled, hope rising like the sun over Brooklyn. "Forever sounds just about right," she typed back. Sometimes, she realized, the biggest tests of faith came not in grand gestures or public declarations, but in quiet moments of choosing love over fear, truth over convenience, integrity over approval. Tonight, they'd both been tested, and together, they'd found their answer. 1 year later, Zariah stood before the mirror in her old apartment, her graduation cap and gown laying across the bed. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the diamond ring on her finger, the one Knox had given her 6 months ago. Not in a grand gesture at some fancy restaurant, but over coffee at Joe's diner. "Ready for this?" Melanie asked, putting the finishing touches on Zariah's makeup. "I've been ready for years." Zariah smoothed her hands over her graduation gown. Beneath it, she wore the navy blue dress from that pivotal dinner date, a reminder of how far she'd come. A knock at the door revealed Miguel, dressed in his Sunday best. "Your chariot awaits, graduate." The chariot was Knox's car, but the driver was conspicuously absent. Instead, Knox himself stood beside it, looking devastating in a perfectly tailored suit. His face lit up when he saw her. "There's my future chief of nursing," he said, pulling her close for a kiss. "Not yet," she laughed against his lips. "Let me graduate first." Minor detail. His eyes sparkled with pride, and something else, a secret he was barely containing. The drive to the graduation ceremony was filled with memories. They passed Joe's diner, where Knox still came for his morning coffee 3 times a week, even though Zariah had finally hung up her apron 2 months ago. They passed the Plaza Hotel where it all began. They passed Brooklyn General Mall, where crisis had crystallized their commitment. "Remember that night?" Knox asked softly, taking her hand. "How could I forget?" Zariah squeezed his fingers. "You chose us over everything. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her knuckles. "Well, second best." "Oh, what was the first?" "Walking into that gala and falling in love with a woman strong enough to change my whole world." At the university, they parted ways, Knox to join the audience, Zariah to line up with her fellow graduates. As she took her place, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The past year had been challenging. Knox had faced intense scrutiny over the building fire, but instead of backing down, he'd doubled his commitment to affordable housing. He'd worked directly with the injured workers and their families, ensuring they received the best care and compensation. The media had tried to paint their relationship as a distraction, but Knox had proven them wrong, turning Owen Enterprises into a leader in ethical urban development. "Zariah Simone Coleman," the dean called. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, cheers erupted from multiple sections. Her diner family was there, led by Miguel's distinctive whistle. The hospital staff who'd mentored her through clinicals applauded proudly. Even Augustus Owen, who'd gradually become something of an ally, stood to clap. But it was Knox's face she sought in the crowd. He stood front and center, beaming with unconditional love and pride. Beside him sat an empty chair with a single white rose, for her grandmother, who hadn't lived to see this day but whose spirit had guided every step. After the ceremony, Knox guided her away from the crowds, toward a quiet corner of the campus garden. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly looking nervous. "Knox, you didn't need to." "Yes, I did." He took both her hands in his. "Because today isn't just about your graduation, it's about our future." Zariah's heart skipped as he continued. "When I first met you, I thought I was the one with everything to offer, but you taught me what real wealth is. It's integrity, compassion, the courage to be exactly who you are." Tears threatened to ruin Melanie's careful makeup work as Knox reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" Zariah asked, opening it with trembling fingers. "The deed to Joe's diner," Knox said softly. "Joy Miguel is retiring, and he agreed to sell it on one condition." "What condition?" "That it stays exactly as it is, a place where everyone belongs, regardless of their bank account or background." Knox's eyes shone with emotion. "A place where a waitress and a billionaire can fall in love over terrible coffee." Zariah stared at the papers in shock. "Knox, I bought it in our names, both of our names, because everything I am, everything I have, is yours. Not as a gift or a charity, but as a partnership." He cupped her face in his hands, The diner will fund a scholarship program for working students in healthcare. Your story, helping write new stories. I love you, she whispered, tears flowing freely now. I love you so much. Marry me, he said suddenly. Zariah laughed through her tears. You already asked. Remember, hence the ring. No. Knox dropped to one knee, right there in his expensive suit. Faz, marry me today. Everyone we love is here. The garden is beautiful. I have a justice of the peace on standby, and Melanie has your mother's dress in her car. You planned all this. With a lot of help, he grinned. Your diner family is setting up the reception as we speak. Even my father helped. He's the one who suggested the garden. Zariah looked around the beautiful space, imagining it transformed for a wedding. Their wedding? A perfect blend of both their worlds. What do you say? Knox asked softly. Ready to start our next chapter? Instead of answering, Zariah pulled him up into a kiss that spoke volumes. When they finally parted, she whispered, yes, 1,000 times yes. Hours later, as the sun set over their gathered loved ones, Zariah and Knox exchanged vows in the garden. She wore her mother's dress, updated by Melanie's skilled hands. He wore his heart on his sleeve, tears falling unashamedly as he promised to love her for all their days. The reception was at Joe's diner, transformed by twinkling lights and flowers, but still wonderfully, authentically itself. Augustus Owen sat at the counter, sharing stories with Mr. Rodriguez. Hospital staff mingled with corporate executives. Two worlds finally and completely merged. Happy? Knox asked as they swayed together to their first dance. Zariah looked around at their unlikely family, at the life they'd built between penthouses and diners, between ambition and authenticity. Beyond happy, she answered. Beyond anything I ever dreamed. You know, Knox mused. They'll say, this is like a fairy tale. The waitress who married the billionaire. Let them talk. Zariah rested her head on his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. We know the real story, which is that love isn't about status or bank accounts. It's about seeing someone for exactly who they are and choosing them every day. She lifted her head to meet his gaze. It's about terrible coffee and late-night study sessions and showing up when it matters. It's about bridge and tunnel traffic and board meetings and finding home in unexpected places, Knox added. It's our story, Zariah concluded. And it's only just beginning. As if on cue, Miguel appeared with 2 cups of the diner's infamously bad coffee. For the happy couple, he announced with a wink. Knox and Zariah took the cups, raising them in a toast to their future, a future built not on glitter and glamour, but on something far more precious, truth, trust, and love beyond measure. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about escaping your world for someone else's. They're about building a new world together, where both of you can shine as exactly who you are. 5 years later, the early morning light filtered through the windows of Joe's diner, catching on the framed newspaper articles that now lined one wall. Owen Healthcare Initiative transforms community access. Local Diners Scholarship Program celebrates 100th graduate. Power couple redefines corporate social responsibility. Zariah Owen moved between the tables, not in a waitress uniform this time, but in crisp hospital scrubs. As chief of nursing at Brooklyn General's new community health center, she usually didn't have time for breakfast at the diner, but some traditions were sacred. So as the usual, Miguel's daughter Rosa called from behind the counter. She'd taken over as manager when her father semi-retired, though Miguel still came in most mornings to make his famous omelets. Actually, make it 2, Zariah smiled, resting a hand on her slightly rounded belly. Your little godchild is hungry this morning. The bell above the door chimed, and Knox walked in, looking somehow even more handsome than the day she'd met him. His suit was still impeccably tailored, but his tie was loose, and there was a smudge of purple finger paint on his cheek. Someone didn't want Daddy to leave for work, he explained, catching Zariah's amused look at the paint. Like father, like daughter. She reached up to wipe the paint away. Did you finally get Luna settled at preschool? Eventually, but only after I promised we'd have dinner at the diner tonight. Knox pulled her close for a kiss. She loves this place as much as we do. Smart kid, Rosa commented, sliding their breakfast orders across the counter. Oh, and Mr. O called earlier. He's still on for Sunday dinner with Luna. Zariah smiled at how naturally Rosa referred to Augustus as Mr. O. Her father-in-law had become a fixture at the diner, claiming Miguel's omelets were better than any 5-star restaurant's breakfast, but they all knew he really came for his weekly chess matches with Mr. Rodriguez and to dote on his granddaughter. "How's the morning sickness?" Knox asked softly as they settled into their usual booth. The same one where they'd had their first real fight, where he'd later proposed, where they'd told their families about both pregnancies. "Better." Zariah sipped her decaf coffee. "Still terrible after all these years. Doctor, Harrison says everything looks perfect." Unlike her mother, who looks extraordinary, Knox's eyes held the same warmth they had the night they met. "Have I mentioned today how much I love you?" "Once or twice," she smiled, "but I don't mind hearing it again." The diner was filling up with its usual morning crowd, medical students from Zariah's scholarship program mixed with business executives from Knox's company. The walls between worlds had long since dissolved, replaced by something better, a community. "Ready for the board meeting?" Zariah asked, knowing Knox was presenting their latest healthcare initiative. "Thanks to your help." He squeezed her hand. "Father's already on board, which means the rest will follow. By next year, every major development project in the city will have a mandatory healthcare accessibility plan." "Look at us," Zariah mused, "changing the world one cup of bad coffee at a time." "Speaking of which," Knox nodded toward the door as Melanie rushed in. "Sorry I'm late." Melanie slid into their booth. "The hospital budget meeting ran over, but I come bearing news. The new pediatric wing fundraising hit its target early." They celebrated over Miguel's omelets, the conversation flowing easily between hospital administration, corporate strategy, and plans for Luna's upcoming birthday party. This was their life now, a beautiful blend of all their worlds. As the morning crowd thinned, Knox reluctantly checked his watch. "I should head to the office." "Walk me to the clinic." Zariah gathered her things. Outside, the Brooklyn morning was fresh with possibility. Knox kept his arm around Zariah as they walked the familiar blocks to the health center that bore both their names. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real," Zariah admitted. "The clinic, the scholarship program, our family, it's beyond anything I dreamed that night at the gala." "Better than a fairy tale," Knox agreed, "because it's real. Every cup of terrible coffee, every late-night emergency, every moment of doubt and triumph, it's all ours." They stopped outside the clinic, where a young woman in a waitress uniform was just leaving after her checkup. She smiled shyly at them, and Zariah saw herself in that smile, all the hope and determination and dreams yet to be realized. "Go change the world, Dr. Owen." Knox kissed her softly. "That's Chief Nurse Owen to you," she teased back. "Damn my mistake." His eyes crinkled with joy. "I love you, Chief. I love you too, Mr. Owen." As Knox headed toward Manhattan and Zariah entered her clinic, the morning sun caught her wedding ring, the same diamond now accompanied by a simple band that matched the one she'd placed on Knox's finger. Its sparkle reminded her of that first night, when she'd borrowed a gold dress and dared to dream. But the real glitter, she'd learned, wasn't in borrowed dresses or diamond rings. It was in early morning kisses that tasted of terrible coffee, in a little girl's finger paintings on expensive suits, in the way Knox still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. It was in the love they chose every day, beyond status, beyond expectations, beyond measure. And that was the most valuable thing of all. The end. If you were in Zariah's shoes, would you have had the courage to reveal your true identity to Knox that night at the Italian dinner, or would the fear of rejection also have made you hide who you really are? In a world where appearances often outweigh character, when do you have to choose between protecting your heart or risking everything for the truth? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.